Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by the AC Airport. Plan your next vacation now. Create memories to last a lifetime with nonstop flights from Atlantic City to Boston, Atlanta, San Juan, and Miami. Book your low-cost flight at spirit.com. Geoff Mosher's back. Yesterday we just took a look at a lot of the defensive guys from the rookie minicamps. I want to look at some of the offensive guys who might be able to help out on this team. And also, the Eagles made a front office move today. Geoff, we spent yesterday looking at this revamped front office, and it looks like the Eagles are continuing to add kind of a new old face, a guy who had been here before. John Elway's former right-hand man is now in Philadelphia.
Yeah, Matt Russell is the name you're referring to, I believe, and he does have some. He was here once before, I believe, when Tom Heckert and Joe Banner in charge of the Eagles front office, and then he went out there when I believe Tom Heckert was out in Denver, the late Tom Heckert, I should say, so not crystal clear yet on, or if it's been reported on exactly what he's going to be doing or when he's going to be hopping aboard there. But the Eagles are clearly missing a lot of guys. I mean, you look at a guy like Tom Donahoe, who was a senior advisor, who's no longer with the team. And Matt Russell has been, pretty high-ranking executive with the Broncos for a while and has been in the league for a while. So this is a good mind for Howie Roseman to have, with him, someone who knows the league really well. And can add that experience that they've lost with some of the guys who aren't necessarily young but have been in the league for a little bit.
Yeah, he is worked in Philadelphia with the Eagles from 06 to 08, and then was in Denver as John Elway's right-hand man, retired, got back into the league after 1 year. Younger guy, too. He's only 48 years old. So he's not a guy who is an older guy. He is a guy who has been a younger guy, and he drafted a lot of guys that are part of that Denver team. Bradley Chubb, Noah Fant. Yep. Like, he's definitely had a pretty nice track record in the draft. So we start, as we talked about yesterday, a lot of new pieces, but Howie Roseman has a guy he's familiar with.
Yeah, a guy he's familiar with. Now, obviously, and I mean, it's been out there for a long time, and it can be looked up. Matt Russell had a DUI in 2013. I think he spent a couple months. That's different than some of the other guys Howie's looking at, where he may not have familiarity with them. This is different. This is a guy that, he does know. He's worked with before and who has a reputation, as you just mentioned, helped, build a Super Bowl team there in Denver a couple of years ago. And Denver has drafted well. Does he make the pick? No, but I mean, he's involved in the process.
Right, the Eagles continuing to reshape their front office, and they do so today. Matt Russell is a part of that. All right, we talked about, rookie mini camps on the defensive side, some of the guys there. Are there any of the guys on the offensive side that have a shot to make this team and be a contributor that were hanging around this weekend? There were 42 guys in all, so it wasn't just the 5-man drafted class. There was 12 undrafted guys, and then you have a bunch of guys who were invited to try out. But if the guys who were signed or there, is anybody out there, somebody you're keeping your eye on?
Well, I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't keep your eye on Carson Strong from Nevada. As we talked about after they drafted him, He tumbled completely out of the draft because of knees that were a real medical issue for certain teams. It wasn't just it's not like you're just having a random ACL or easy ACL. I mean, he's got a pretty severe history there with the knees, and enough that I was told that he didn't pass a lot of teams as physical. So, or they may have taken him off the board because of fear of passing the physical. So, obviously, though, the arm talent, Mike, could be, you could argue that it's top 50 as far as, overall value in the draft. I mean, some people felt he was a late first, second round talent who would probably tumble a little bit. No one told me they thought he would go completely undrafted, but again, when you speak to certain people, they don't know the medical situation all the time. Mm-hmm. So just from a talent standpoint, they felt he was one of the better arm talents in the league. So for him to go undrafted and the Eagles to be able to sign him, obviously he will be here to compete for that third spot with Reed Sinnett. And if the knees hold up, if he looks like he can throw the ball a little bit and stay healthy, you would think that the Eagles would pay a lot of attention to that.
Yeah, I mean, number one, aren't you surprised that he's a quarterback, for God's sake? People reach on quarterbacks all the time. Aren't you a bit surprised that someone who had the possibility of, I heard some people say they thought he was the best quarterback in the class, didn't get drafted at all?
Yeah, I am surprised. However, I will tell you that in having some other conversations since the day after the draft, I think there are some people who questioned not just like the knees, but can he make anything happen in a muddy pocket? I mean, if you went to practice and watched him all week, as scouts do, they don't just go to the games, they'll go visit the schools and they'll really watch. I was told by a few people that, just watching him throughout the week, you can tell like he does not move well at all. And then, I think there's probably some leadership that people will talk about. Is he that kind of alpha guy that you want leading your huddle? Greg Cosell was on with us, and I think even mentioned that he had heard from some teams that they're not sure, from that standpoint, if Carson checks off all the boxes there.
All right, well, he's definitely a guy. It'll be interesting, too, because obviously you have Gardner Minshew here, so he's not going to be the backup quarterback, but will he be a guy that they at least keep around on the practice squad? I would imagine they want to work with him. They're going to want to have him in their possession.
I mean, the question is, will they could he make the Eagles keep 3 quarterbacks? In other words, it's a risk to put a guy in the practice squad because you have to waive him first. And then if you waive a quarterback, it's possibly gets claimed by another team. And it's easy to say, well, no team drafted him or signed him. But who knows? If he goes out there and plays well in the preseason, then it's a different story. So if he has a good preseason training camp, can he force the issues to keep a third running back, or would they try to take the risk of waiving him and bringing him back on the practice squad?
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, wide receiver, obviously, they went out and made the trade to go get A.J. Brown, but obviously you got Rager, Ward, you've got Highsmith, you've got Watkins, you've got a bunch of guys who have, we imagine, Pascal's another guy they brought in here. Is there any other guys in the group that stick out? Do you think there's a guy that we're not talking about that might have a shot, whether it be in the return game? Maybe it's a slot guy. They don't really have that classic, slot guy.
Right. One of the rookie free agents that they signed from Utah, his name is Britton Covey. I think it's Covey. It could be Covey. Haven't gotten official pronunciation on that. But someone who would more see slot than on the outside. A short guy with a lot of twitch, some good explosion, and was a very good returner at the college level. The Eagles have been looking to upgrade their specifically return specialist position. If you recall, when we talked during free agency, they wanted and they had interest in a guy who played for the 49ers, a wide receiver named Richie James. He wound up signing with the Giants instead. Adam Kaplan on our pod reported that they had some interest in Andre Roberts, who wound up signing with the Panthers. And Andre has been predominantly a special teams player for most of his career. I mean, he's gone in there and been a third or fourth receiver at times, but he's really at this stage of the game a returner. And so they're clearly looking for one. So even if Britton Covey is not necessarily, a guy out there catching 10 passes every training camp, lighting it up, if he's doing a really good job in the return game, which is where he's supposed to excel, then he may force the team to ask the question, can we keep a guy in the 53 just for that spot? That's a risk, but the Eagles have actually done this before. I mean, they have had players. Do you remember his name was Jorick Calvin? You remember that guy from 2008 or 2009? He was really a safety, but he never really played safety. He just returned kicks and punts that year. So they've done it before, and if someone's good enough at it, they'll do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the guy like Covey, Utah, 5'8", small guy, even if he's not a part of their receiving plans, is there room for that guy on this roster, knowing how poor they have been in that area? Because this was supposed to be Rager's job, right?
Yeah, he was supposed to be one of their primary punters, although by year 3, supposed to be so good that you would not want him returning kicks and punts, right? Because normally when you get to that level, they stop doing that for you and find somebody else to do it. So, yeah, but it is something that you ordinarily see either out of your 4th or 5th receiver or maybe your backup cornerback. But we know that there's really no one in their cornerback group or even maybe in their running back group. See, they do have guys who can return from the running backs, whether it's Jason Huntley who has to make the team, or we've seen Boston Scott return kicks. So there's a chance that they find a running back who's got return skills, and if they did, and if that running back's going to serve a purpose that's beyond just returning, then that makes it difficult for Britton Covey.
I'll tell you what, though, I would love to see a situation where the return is a big factor, but I would love to see them have a receiver, like one of these little slot guys that just catches, turns up the field. That's just kind of tough to like they just haven't had that guy that is seemingly all over this league now.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I sort of think it's not all over the league as much as it used to be. I mean, there used to be some guys, whether it was, the Devin Hesters of the world, or who's the guy from the Rams with the hyphen in his name? I can't all of a sudden think.
Oz Hakeem.
Oz Hakeem, right. There used to be a tremendous amount of great special teams returners and specialists, but because the rules have changed, you don't see it anymore. I mean, every now and then you'll see a good punt return, but I don't think you see as many touchdowns or explosive punt returns as you used to see, because there's so many more teams that go for it now on fourth down. So even the punts in general are down across the league. Yeah,
you're looking like you're Cole Beasley, a guy that you're like, that guy's not any good. But then when you play him, he's such a pain in the ass. Or Julian Edelman was that guy. You think of a guy,
right?
Like those type of players that you don't think much of, but they're just always kind of. And the Eagles just seemingly haven't had that sure-handed guy who's a pain in the ass.
They have not. It's definitely been a deficiency with them for the last few years.
All right, so let's, that's the receiver thing. Covey is a guy to keep an eye on. He's the guy from Utah. Calcaterra, I'm interested in what you think when they get to training camp, what this tight end, obviously they like Calcaterra. He's a 6th-round pick, so that gives you a shot to kind of make the team. But does he have a role? Do they view him as the leader above some of these other guys that they have? Because that room is kind of in flux.
Yeah, it is in flux, and I'm really interested to see, and we won't find out until training camp, really, because they're just not doing as much in the OTAs as, you would like to see from a fan standpoint or a media standpoint. But if you remember Dallas Goedert coming out of South Dakota State, everybody said he was a receiving tight end. He catches, he plays in a spread offense that has very little pro-style element to it. And then, lo and behold, he wound up being a way better blocker than anybody realized, and it wasn't because of a misevaluation. It's just because there was no real examples of it on tape of him being asked to block. He just happened to be good at something that he wasn't asked to do in college. So that's what I always wonder about kids like this. Grant Calcaterra, who's a pass-catching tight end, he's not considered a blocker. So, to make the team, he's battling with other pass-catching tight ends. Jake Stoll is a guy who last year made it as a rookie free agent, but Jake can block a little bit. He's more of an H-back, Nebraska guy, right? So can Grant Calcaterra block a little bit? Because if he can, that's going to be a big feather in his cap to try to be the number 2 tight end on the team. If he can't, then he just kind of gets lumped into the guys at that position that they have, who are all just kind of, big wide receivers who play the slot.
Yeah, that's going to be, because – who was the guy that tore his ACL? Tyree Jackson. I mean, obviously, I don't think he's going to be in the mix.
Yeah.
Right, he's not in the mix. So you got Calcaterra, you got Stoll. Who else is in the running? J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I mean, it seems like this is set,
Whiteside, yep.
Right? This is set up that we want you. We took you because we want you to win this.
Right, you would think that. Yeah, I agree. And then, of course, they still have Richard Rodgers on the team who can also block, and they've got Noah Togiai who really blocks. That's really what his thing is. So they've equipped themselves with all types of guys. They've got blocking tight ends, they've got receiving tight ends, but the only one who
they don't have a complete guy
can blend them is their starter, Dallas Goedert. So that's what makes the competition there pretty wide open. Although I'll say, the fact that Jack Stoll was able to catch the ball fairly well and block a little bit gives him a little bit of a leg up without knowing what Grant Calcaterra can or can't do.
Right, but it's funny because Calcaterra was a guy that a lot of people thought might have been more than a 6th-round pick, and then he had retired. He had these concussion issues. At the same time, can I trust a guy who had all these concussion issues?
It's a fair question.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, that's. Yeah, and I'm sure the Eagles did a lot of homework on that and diligence on that, knowing that history there.
Yeah. All right.
But that's, like you said, that's why he's a 6th-round pick and probably not a guy who, from a talent standpoint, probably would have went higher.
While we're on the offense, Miles Sanders in the last year of his deal. Does that tell you change?
I think we talked about this, or maybe I talked about Adam. I almost think that
I was having a conversation with my buddy the other day, and he brought up, DeMarco Murray was in the last year of his deal, and then they decided, hey, let's just run this guy rampant. So do the Eagles have that mindset of, hey, let's get the most we can out of Sanders because we have no intention of bringing him back?
I don't think so, only because his body has already had difficulty holding up with the responsibilities that they've asked of him. Could I see it going the other way, where he loses some snaps, not necessarily because he's not getting the extension, but because they did draft Kenny Gainwell in the 5th round last year, but felt that if he had not opted out the year before, he had played another year of college football, you're probably talking about a guy who could have worked himself into, day 2 type of, 2nd or 3rd round territory. And he obviously handled his role well last year when it was given to him. And so it's natural to assume that they're going to want to see what they got at a year 2 in Kenny Gainwell. And so if he performs well, you could see him getting a little bit more of a role. And then obviously that would cut in a little bit to Miles Sanders' job. But I still think right now it's Miles Sanders is the lead back of this team. He's their most well-rounded, complete, and explosive back.
Yeah, they did bring in the kid from Oklahoma in the undrafted rookie field. So I doubt they have – you're going to see a running back group that's going to look a lot of the same.
Yeah, so that's interesting. The Oklahoma kid, Kennedy Brooks, that you're referring to, is sort of like your bruiser, because the Eagles don't have a bruiser.
They got rid of Jordan Howard's not back.
Right, without Jordan Howard being back. And we mentioned this in the pod, that they didn't – and they could still bring Jordan Howard back. He hasn't signed with anybody. So we'll see what happens there. But he is a bruiser, but I remember them having, Holyfield's kid.
Elijah.
His first name is Elijah. Thank you. And he was known for being a bruiser. And he spent over a year with the Eagles, and they never gave him the ball, and they never gave him an opportunity to show what he's got. So it'll be interesting to see if Kennedy Brooks gets a little bit more run, play, anything involved, because he offers a skill set right now that all the other running backs they have they lack.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. A look at now. What is the next time that they will be out with the group?
That's interesting question.
They not announced that yet, right?
Because they're basically going off the same schedule that they did last year, surprisingly. So if you remember last year, Nick Sirianni kind of negotiated with the team, don't boycott like everybody was threatening to do. I'll work with you. And they agreed to certain concessions. And then the Eagles wound up getting everything done by the end of June. And then they had before June, like early in June. So they wound up having about 8 weeks, if not more, between the end of mini camp and the start of training camp. And I believe they're going that same route again.
All right. Well, hopefully they're out. We'd like to see them out there. We love the Football at 4. And, of course, hey, there's a lot of NFL going on. We will certainly get into that. I know Andrew tomorrow will look at his thoughts on the undrafted guys and where they think. But, obviously, you have any thoughts on Tom Brady signing a 10-year, $375 million contract? Not to play football, but to do what we're doing.
My thought about
your agent got you that deal? Because mine's not doing so good.
No. I have a few less zeros on mine. About 11. Listen, people always say, I don't watch football games for the broadcasters. I don't know why they make so much money, right? But literally every time Tony Romo is broadcasting a game, he's trending on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I had this conversation with somebody today, okay? And they made a good point, so I can't take credit for this. I don't think people watch the game because of the broadcaster or for the broadcaster. But the
Correct.
NFL does value the broadcaster, and that gives you the profile of games that you're going to get, which gives you more ad dollars. Hey, we have this great package of games because we have these great broadcasters.
Yeah, I definitely – listen, my point was going to be that these networks aren't dumb. They make money for a reason, and if they think that having a $375 million color commentator is worth it, then that's because they're making way more than that because of it. So it's done for a reason. We like to say, who cares, but it's done for a reason.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. He's got the Inside the Birds podcast, drops tomorrow morning. Check out the latest edition, Mondays, Thursdays, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Jeff, take care, bud.
Take care.
All right, Geoff Mosher is the rest of the week off. Andrew's here tomorrow. Can't wait to hear Andrew's take on where he sees a lot of these guys fitting in. We'll go through that and more. Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.